Hello, everyone, and welcome to another Insights from Women Leaders event. My name is Rula Kake, and I'm the CEO of Salus Vitae Group, and I'll be the host for the event. In October, we launched the Insights from Women Leaders series. This series highlights the journeys and contributions of various women leaders in healthcare. These industry leaders will share their insights on a range of topics impacting healthcare, our communities, and their role in shaping the future. These events have a diverse and global audience at varying stages of their careers. I encourage everyone to check out the recordings of our previous guest leaders if they haven't already done so. The recordings are available on our website. Now, over the course of an hour, I'll be asking our guest leader a number of questions, and then we'll open it up to the audience questions. So please submit any of your questions in the Q&A box. We encourage you both during and after the event to post any takeaways that you have from the event, both in the Q&A box or on various social media platforms, and feel free to tag us at Salus Vitae Group. Salus Vitae Group. We love hearing how you benefited from the various insights from our distinguished guests. Now, the session will be recorded and available for replay after the event. Now, I'm very, very pleased to welcome our guest leader today, Dr. Erin Fox. Now, Dr. Erin Fox is the Senior Pharmacy Director of Drug Information and Support Services at the University of Utah Healthcare and Associate Professor Adjunct in the Department of Pharmacotherapy, University of Utah College of Pharmacy. She is active in both state and national pharmacy and health-related societies, serving in a variety of volunteer and elected positions. Now, the University of Utah Drug Information Service provides content for the American Society of Health System Pharmacists Drug Shortage Resource Center with some support from Vizient. She served as a media resource and advocate for changes to improve ongoing drug shortage situation and rising drug costs. And if any of you know me, you know that drug shortages is also something dear to my heart in terms of the cause. Now, Dr. Fox is an award-winning healthcare leader that has shed light on numerous important issues such as drug shortages and drug pricing. She's appeared on various outlets, including the New York Times, the Harvard Business Review, Wall Street Journal, Yahoo Finance, American Public Media's Marketplace, the National Public Radio's All Things Considered, and Vanity Fair. Now, in December 2015, Dr. Fox testified for the Senate Aging Committee regarding the impact of sudden price increases on health systems. She is recognized as an expert in drug shortages and received the ISMP Cheers Award and the ASHP Award of Excellence in recognition of her work on drug shortages. She's also received the ASHP Award of Excellence for raising awareness about the problem of increasing drug prices and was recently awarded the William A. Zimmer Award for her advocacy efforts. Welcome, and thank you so much for taking the time to be with us today.
Thank you so much.
Okay, so let's jump in right away to the question. And the first question we've asked all our guest leaders is, did you expect to be where you are today?
Absolutely not. Never in a million years did I think I would even be a leader, honestly. My career path, I was very focused on being a clinical pharmacist and working on medication use policy. And I just loved that work so much. I had no idea when I volunteered to lead a project on drug shortages very, very early in my career. You know, I raised my hand and said yes, but I didn't know it would kind of mushroom cloud.
I love that. Actually, too, that's even how I got involved with the drug shortages as well. And that's how we connected over the years a while back. But yeah, it's amazing how just a simple interest at the time can actually lead to a career and focus area moving forward. Now, generally what we've done is we've started with the future in mind, and then we come back to kind of the current realities and intertwine within that your experiences of the past and how that's shaped your outlook. Now, looking into the future, what do you want your future to be, and what do you want your legacy to be?
That's a really good question. I've spent a lot of my time as even a leader, maybe not traditionally doing those future planning exercises as much as I know other leaders do. Part of that is, you know, I am so involved with advocacy efforts and making change that those incremental efforts, small bits and pieces can seem it can seem daunting to think of what the final path should be because so many baby steps are required on the way there. But you know, I suspect I will be remembered for working on drug shortages, but honestly, I would love it if we could fix that problem, because there are many other problems to work on. I would love it if hospitals were able to access all the medications they needed. I would love it if all of those people that have leadership titles of, drug shortage manager or, that work could all be channeled, into other medication use activities that really help optimize care for patients. I feel like drug shortages, while extraordinarily important to manage well for patient safety, it's wasted work, honestly. I mean, if we had access to the medications we needed, we could certainly funnel that work into a different way. So that's it's kind of a long answer there. I do see positive changes on the horizon for shortages. It's a really good time for change. So I do hope that in the future, shortages will be a thing that we talk about that used to happen in the past and not necessarily still a current focus.
And I mean, you've been in this space for more than 20 years. How real, I mean, we aspire for something and then we have to think about how realistic it is in terms of quote unquote eliminating shortages versus minimizing the impact. What does the future look like there in terms of how you think we're going to really address them?
So that's a great question, again, taking the long view of looking at this problem for so long, for the first 9 to 10 years of drug shortage work, we didn't honestly know some of the true causes for many of the shortages because FDA hadn't revealed that information. We know much more about how most shortages are caused by um, economic issues, but mostly quality problems. And so the quality problems are something that can actually be targeted and worked on. And what I see right now is a lot of effort focusing on fixing those quality problems. And so I think that is it's a good time for this type of progress. COVID has actually brought to light some of the limitations of our whole medication supply chain. And so with more and more lawmakers interested and just people in general interested, I think that the time is right for some change. So it's exciting.
So that's actually a good also kind of transition to what excites you about the future in terms of this topic or other issues with regards to like within the pharmacy profession, within healthcare, or even across the board, across various industries.
That's a great question. And what a long week this has been here in the United States. I think one of the things that excites me is just the attention that certain topics are getting. That in the past it used to be really hard to get people interested in thinking about shortages. It used to be hard to get people interested in thinking about where our medications come from, where the raw materials come from. It's really wonky and really kind of detail oriented, and it's so hard to get people interested in that. But people are interested now, and so that excites me. It can be certainly I have dark days where, healthcare seems unfixable. And you think about how so much of our healthcare system, at least in the United States, is not focused on the patient and is not focused on making things better for patient care. But I see a lot of work on that front, and I see a lot of people interested in making a difference and making sure that patients have access to medicines, making sure those outcomes are optimal, and that is very exciting to me. And so that can usually bring me out of my funk when I get really discouraged.
That's so true. I find myself as well. Like, I know when we talk, we get excited about talking about these topics, but now it seems like it's across the board, right?
Yeah.
Everybody's talking about, everyone wants to understand the supply chain. What does that ultimately mean? And not just those on the front lines. And even those on the front lines, you find that they've had to educate themselves within the pharmaceutical supply chain on a different level in terms of figuring out where to have an impact. So that's exciting in the sense that our these topic areas are, we're talking about them, although you've over the years too made several media appearances, and it seems like drug shortages appear in the news almost daily. But, do you find a different sense of urgency now versus before when we're talking about this issue?
I do. So, thinking back to maybe 10 years ago, the media would only get excited about a shortage if we could really point to a patient that was harmed. I would talk to reporters, they would say, what's going on? I would tell them about a shortage, tell them about how we're trying to manage things in the hospital and how problematic it was. And they, well, my editor is going to want to see a patient that's been harmed. And I guess that's the media. But now people are much more interested in thinking about our supply chain. So I think the unfortunate events with Hurricane Maria began a little bit of that with Puerto Rico and their manufacturing sectors being affected. I remember former FDA Commissioner Scott Gottlieb coming out and telling people that he was worried about this long list of drugs, and literally every reporter that I'd ever talked to was texting me, calling me, emailing me, saying, what's the list? What's the list? And you just have to keep explaining over and over that many parts of our supply chain are opaque, and we don't always get to know which manufacturer makes a medicine and where it's made and which factory site. None of that is really available on a transparent and public way. And so now with COVID, certainly I got the same thing. Early in February, our chief medical officer called me up and said, Erin, we got to get the list of everything that's made in China right now and buy up. And so I'm trying to explain, we're not going to hoard, and that just those details are really kind of interesting to think about.
So the next question comes as we think about the future. What do we need in terms of tools or things to consider as we're thinking about these current and future challenges and realities that we all need to work to address?
What a great question. I think the most important thing that will make anyone successful, and I think this is certainly applicable in healthcare, but maybe in any sector, it's something that I certainly talk with all of my learners about, is flexibility. You've got to be flexible. Things are changing so quickly that if you're not flexible in maybe your role of what you're working on, things can change in a minute. And so that flexibility is such an important asset to have. And I see this, people who are maybe have less flexibility as a characteristic. The people who hold out for maybe one specific position after residency versus being flexible enough to take maybe a role that they hadn't considered before, but kind of make it their own. Flexibility is so important. I just can't emphasize that enough.
Yes, I feel like this, and during this time, I feel like that is a trait we've all had to adapt to very quickly as well. So now let's move to the present, kind of back to the present. And we want to provide an opportunity for you to highlight any initiatives that you're working on. So what current initiatives are you working on that you're most excited about?
Well, I was just appointed to the National Academy of Science Committee on securing America's medical supply chain. So really excited to start that work. I can't really talk about much about it, but it'll be a 2-year project. And so it's just barely getting underway. So I'm really, really excited about that work. But, also, so my role here at our health system is over our medication use policy. And one of the things that I'm really excited about is we're making changes to the way that we manage our formulary. And, instead of taking every single drug through the P&T process and having reviews and things taking a long time, we're trying to expedite the process for products that are mainly used in the outpatient setting. And it's a really fun project. So I'm really excited about working on that as well.
Wonderful. And so what obstacles or challenges keep you up at night?
Drug shortages. They just they do. And with COVID, it has been particularly challenging. So here at our health system, very very early on, when we didn't know what was coming at us, I actually asked our chief medical officer, who was having meetings about crisis standards of care with our state of Utah. I asked him to make sure that medications were a component there, because I could see if we were going to quadruple the number of ICU patients that we needed to take care of, we didn't have enough medicine for that, and we were going to need to figure out rationing strategies. And so certainly had some sleepless nights about that. I also worry about, I lots of people find me. I'm not that hard to track down, and parents will call me when their children are affected by a drug shortage, and some of those keep me up at night as well. But yeah, and then of course this week, of course it's the election, like what's going to happen. So that keeps me up at night as well. But that should be over pretty quick, I think.
So just for our attendees, in terms of a little bit of context on drug shortages, when we talk about drug shortages, because you and myself we're both based in the United States, and when we talk about drug shortages, when you're mentioning drug shortages, are you mentioning it more of a United States problem, a global problem? Can you give the attendees just a little bit more context in terms of what is this situation of drug shortages that we're talking about? And is the US different than maybe other countries, or what does that
Yeah,
look like?
absolutely. So, drug shortages are definitely a global problem, especially with global manufacturing. Many of the products that we need are maybe made only in one or two places in the world, or the API, the raw materials for those medicines. And so drug shortages can happen anywhere in the world. I'm most familiar with kind of parallel efforts that are going on in Europe. So last year I had the opportunity to travel to Belgium and be part of a global conference. So we actually had folks there from South America, almost from every nation in the EU was represented there, and I was representing the United States. And so it was very, very interesting for me to learn about drug shortages and how they were slightly different than in the United States. In the United States, most of the shortages are problems where you can't get a specific formulation, like a specific strength or a vial size. It's pretty rare that we are 100% out of something. But in Europe, because of the way that they do their purchasing through their tendering process, even if another generic product might be available to them, if their country hasn't negotiated a contract for that product, they may have a more difficult time accessing it. And so some of their shortages may actually be a little bit more severe than in the US. However, because they have national healthcare systems there, they have a much easier time managing shortages than we do in the US. So in the United States, it's hospital by hospital, and everyone has a different electronic health record. It was most interesting for me to hear from the folks at Leuven, where we were at in Belgium, and they talked about how they have a committee and they push out one change to all hospitals in Belgium, and that's the shortage management plan. And I thought, wow, that's amazing. But of course, it's a much smaller scale than the US. But unfortunately, drug shortages are a bit of a global problem, and part of that is, if we can work on fixing some of the quality issues at these factories, then that helps the situation for all countries.
And the pandemic now has truly disrupted supply chains across, not just in healthcare, kind of across the board. And as a result, various initiatives within various sectors have emerged as a result of the disruptions in the pandemic and the situation that we have on hand. What current new initiatives emerge as a result of the pandemic that you've seen that can positively influence and address some of these challenges that we've already talked about, or others?
So I think one of the great silver linings of this pandemic is how quickly we can make decisions and work together. And so I personally had the opportunity to work very quickly and rapidly with our physician leaders to put together use guidelines and plans. And it is amazing. In an academic medical center, things usually take a while to make changes. And it is amazing how quickly that can shift in an emergency situation. And everyone is really a little bit excited about it, where in the past it might be difficult maybe to get some physicians interested in medication use policy work. They'd be like, oh, I don't have time for that committee. I don't have time for 8 committee meetings. Well, we can have a phone call and decide in that 1 hour what will happen. And so I think that collegiality and just the increased need for speed, but just the recognition that we can move a little bit more quickly has actually been really fun. Actually, as terrible as things are, I will say that part of it has been very, very fun for me.
Cool. So now we're going to move into the next group of questions that focus on leadership and mentorship. We asked all of our guest leaders a simple question on leadership, and that is, how would you describe a leader? You responded with the following: leadership means service and getting out of the way. Support and develop those around you to perform their best. Can you elaborate on this and what has shaped this outlook for you?
Sure. I think part of the outlook is that, I didn't really have a lot of formal leadership training. I have a leadership role now, but, and certainly I've had lots of professional development along the way, but, I've always loved being part of a team because I think no one person can do everything. No one person can know everything. I think we're smarter when we all work together. And I have the most fantastic team of pharmacists that work for me. And honestly, my job is to just give them their resources and kind of get out of their way and help where I can, maybe take the heat where I can and give them all the credit. And it's amazing what you can accomplish if you don't think too much about who needs the credit. It's I think teamwork is so important in getting things done. And as a leader, I really kind of ascribe to that servant leadership model.
I love when I read it too, the first thing that came to mind is the definition of a leader didn't actually even include the leader. It's the leadership part of it, and it's others. And so I think that there's such a great element to that. There's also another quote on advocacy, actually, that I wanted to add, that I had read in your the William Zelmer Lecture Award. I took this out of the quote for that, and I think it speaks to advocacy. And like we mentioned before, and you mentioned, this is a week here in the United States where we have the elections, and so the conversation around advocacy just kind of across the board at different levels. So there's this quote that I actually got, and I would love for you to speak on that because this was really nice. So you stated that you may think of advocacy as a discrete event, a simple letter to write, or a specific vote to get out. Instead, I'd like you to think about the long view, an advocacy journey marked by personal commitment and perseverance, taken one step at a time. So what are your thoughts on building on that about advocacy and how we can group both leadership and advocacy together?
Advocacy is something that I'm incredibly passionate about. So thank you for pulling that quote out. I think not everyone realizes how essential advocacy is, especially to the profession of pharmacy, but it can be really essential to anyone in healthcare. If you care about your patients, you have an obligation to advocate for them. And I would argue that if you read the Oath of a Pharmacist, you will find elements in there that really say everyone should be an advocate for your patient, and that's advocacy. And I think some people are frustrated with advocacy because it can seem like making changes is very difficult, and it is, and it's baby steps along the way, and that's why I talk about perseverance. You've got to stick with it. Yes, you may have a very lofty goal at the end, which for me is to eliminate drug shortages, but we can't legislate our way there, and there are a lot of steps along the way that to be accomplished in order to make progress. And so I love talking with students and residents about this as well, because it's to me it is part of your professional commitment. If you are signing on to be a pharmacist, you need to be an advocate for your patients, and that means advocating for change. So yeah, go do it. It's not hard. I mean, if I can do it, it's people will ask me. They'll say, "Well, Erin, you're in front of Congress, you're in front of the media. Of course you can do it." But I didn't start that way. It was a lot of very small baby steps. Even just being willing to talk to that first reporter was a a huge leap for me, and it's taken a lot of time. But if you have that perseverance and that passion, then those opportunities will be there for you.
And do you think, because I even read across and it seemed kind of a consistent message in terms of getting outside of your comfort zone, both maybe for advocacy or for any sort of leadership opportunities, or for how it all started by raising your hand and starting a new project or something? Is that something that you feel like kind of has driven you throughout your career in terms of getting out of your comfort zone?
Absolutely. I think, for me, I was very comfortable as a clinical pharmacist. That was a very good comfort zone for me. It is out of my comfort zone to take on new leadership challenges. And I think that is in part what being a leader is about, is getting out of your comfort zone and being willing to try new things and think out of the box and be creative. It's it's not necessarily easy, but it's worth it to have the opportunity to lead an organization, to be a leader in your organization and make changes for your patients. That discomfort that you might have personally can easily be overcome when you see the benefits that could be there for your patients.
So the next question is focused on leadership in healthcare versus other sectors. Do you think that leadership is different in one sector versus another?
That's a really good question. I honestly haven't had much opportunity outside of healthcare to really think about that. I think in general, though, good leaders still want to inspire teamwork, want to get out of the way of their teams. I think those, need to be flexible. Those qualities are probably more important in any sector. I think healthcare, though, layered on top of your role as a leader, you still need to be very clinically savvy, and you have a whole kind of maybe an extra layer of things that you still need to be very, very competent in, that maybe a leader in another type of sector wouldn't have. I'm not sure, but whether it's keeping up on new rules and regulations, again, advocacy opportunities there to provide comments when those dockets hit. That's an easy way to advocate. But yeah, it's I'm not sure, but I think healthcare is just a little bit different in that in many cases you're layering your role as a healthcare professional on top of being a leader.
So the next question gets at, when we think about leadership and understanding leadership over the years and how that's really changed, what do you think we're getting wrong about leadership? What is something that you've kind of heard over the years now or past, or you just think that we're kind of going the wrong direction or thinking about leadership in the wrong way, and you'd like to maybe have us think about it a little bit differently. What do you think about what we're getting wrong about leadership?
That's a really, really interesting question. I think some, there are some leaders that care more about sometimes leadership activities turn into almost a game, like you win or lose, and um, they care more about the winning, or they care more about getting that credit, and having their name on something versus actually accomplishing the project and making a difference. And I think it's definitely my bias and my preference that I'm not really focused on who gets the credit, as long as we accomplish the goal and then we make things better for our patients. But there are leaders out there that don't like that, and they say, no, this has to have my name on it. I want the recognition. I think focusing so much on the recognition that you're going to get for something can actually take away from the final results of an activity. And so I think I would just encourage people, if you are considering leadership, maybe for folks that are early in their career, if you're considering leadership as a way to kind of, I don't know, get that constant recognition, maybe it's not the best path. I think that's not something to focus on.
But at that point, would you define them as a leader or as like a manager or supervisor? At what distinction then do you kind of switch them over to, well, you're not necessarily a leader, you're more of just like a supervisor or someone kind of higher in the ranks?
Yeah, I've always really enjoyed the discussions that Sarah White has led on little L leaders and big L leaders, and how you can be a leader whatever your role is. And just because you have that, maybe big L leadership title, it doesn't always mean that you're an effective leader. And so whatever your role is, I think it's important to think about that distinction. And are you there just for the title, or are you there to do the job and make things better for patients?
I like how you also made the distinction with the leader, that they put the initiative and the project first in terms of ensuring that they complete it, or that their teams feel empowered to make a difference. Their metrics of success seem quite different than the other type of individual that you mentioned, in terms of wants to get individual credit, or is there for a specific name or title, which we know the name or title is not what's going to complete the job, for sure.
Sure. And certainly there are leaders that do both. They get the job done, but to me, it's always a little bit frustrating when they also want their brand on it. So, or they, they may come away from a meeting where they've made some good compromises, but at the end we've come to a really good solution. But they feel like because they didn't get their first choice, they've kind of lost. And so that kind of win or lose thinking, to me, is not necessarily the best way to be a leader.
So really defining actually what your win and lose is actually also probably helps you identify what kind of leader you are, right? So that's actually
probably.
Just thinking about as you were saying it.
Yeah.
So if your win includes someone beyond you and maybe the initiative that you have, you're maybe a certain type of leader versus, if you might have a list of like 10 wins and kind of even prioritizing them just to kind of see at what point where do you focus your energies? So that's really great, because our past guest leaders, Dr. Lucinda and Dr. Sandra, also focused so much on passion, the passion in terms of having a cause that you're working towards, or wanting to improve. And in your case, we've talked about this in terms of drug shortages being one of them. And then even Dr. Lucinda talked a lot about humble leadership, and I think that speaks to a lot of what you're saying in terms of not putting yourself first and really looking at your team and others to ensure the success of the initiative. So I think that's a consistent theme, it seems, that we've been seeming to have. So that's great.
Absolutely.
The
And
next,
just I was just going to say
yes,
those
please.
other two conversations that you've had, if folks have signed on, and go back and watch those two, because I loved watching those two sessions that you've already led. So thank you for that. It's very humbling to kind of follow in their footsteps, actually.
Honestly, like you're within, ever since I've known you, and then just kind of the work that you've moved forward in terms of drug shortages and putting to light various advocacy issues. I think it's very important as a leader to and to influence those in terms of those seeking kind of these insights and experiences, to understand that, you know, if you do have a passion area that you're working towards, you can build a career in that area, because there's always these challenges, like you mentioned, that need to be solved. And even within the same one, things are constantly adapting and changing, right? The supply chain
Absolutely.
looks very different now than what it was 5-10 years ago. The issue in the United States looked maybe very different 10 years ago than it does, or maybe not so, in terms of whatever challenges that you have. So things are constantly adapting. And when you kind of have those areas and then you build upon that, and I feel like a lot of your career has, with the advocacy work, has kind of built upon that. Like, how are you creating those steps towards change in various different ways, right? And I think every leader does that a little differently. So the next question gets at, what leadership lessons and advice can you provide current and future healthcare leaders at different stages in their career? So our attendees are truly anywhere from students all the way to top executives. So what kind of advice would you give, or lessons maybe learned that you hope that they can kind of think through as they're listening to you now, and then maybe listening to it again or later?
So I would um, I would encourage people to think about saying yes. Um, and you may have opportunities that come your way that you might think, is this the wrong time? Am I the best person? Can I do this? And I will say that every time I've had one of those opportunities come my way, um, it's and I've said yes. It's always been such a valuable experience. And I know this is, it sounds a little bit counterintuitive, right? Because there's a lot of discussion about work-life balance and learning to say no. And I am probably the very worst example of not saying no to things. But just I think being open. And again, to me, it goes back to flexibility. So being open to a new idea, being open to trying something new, um, being willing to say yes to something, and of course make it manageable. But I think back when I took my first leadership role, it wasn't the best time for me, honestly. I had a 1-year-old daughter and a 5-year-old daughter, and life seemed unbelievably busy. And I thought, how could I possibly do this? But it was an opportunity that I thought wouldn't come my way again, and I was very interested. And so it worked. It worked, and I'm not sad that I said yes to that. So again, um, my advice to anyone at any stage in your career is to think about, can you say yes? Um, so yeah.
And I love that, but how do you prioritize? Like, how, I mean, all the S's, how do you even begin to start thinking about what is it that where do you put your energies towards, how much time, not that it's an equation or a rock, like a specific style, but what do you begin to kind of think about as you prioritize?
Yeah, I mean, of course you should prioritize based on your passion. Um, I actually, I don't say yes to things where I feel like that is not a good fit for me. But so of course prioritize on your passion, and um, it's of course going to depend on the support network that you have. Do you have support from your leader to do those things? Do you have support at home? Do you have the support? I had a tremendous amount of support, from my husband and from my own leader, to take on new roles and do new things. And so that helps you triage. If you don't have that support, then maybe it's not the right time. But I think that should go into, again, not necessarily an equation, but maybe on your list of pluses and minuses, thinking about that level of support.
I like it. So this is the last question before we open it up to the Q&A. So please, if you have any questions, please put them in the Q&A box. So the final question on my part before we go into the audience questions is that we would like to take this opportunity to support one another and recognize the positive influence we have on one another. I feel like when I talk to leaders, there's usually at least a handful of people, and they can generally name one or two right off the bat that have truly inspired them or influenced them positively in some way. Name a woman that has inspired you, and why did you choose this person?
Oh my gosh, I know you gave me a sneak peek at this question before we started this conversation, and I've been thinking about it because there are so many unbelievable women who have inspired me. Of course, I think about my mom and how she went back to school and got her master's degree, and she finished her career as associate Medicaid director for our state of Utah. And so that's been very fun for me to get to talk healthcare policy with her. Kind of did probably spark a lot of my interest in some of the healthcare policy issues. But professionally, I think of Captain Val Jensen from FDA. She leads FDA's drug shortage team, and I've had the opportunity to work with her and learn from her really from the moment that I began working on drug shortages. She is a very inspiring leader. She has a very, very difficult job, and just again, very encouraging to me to keep up with some of the work. Sometimes I understand that FDA can't talk about certain things or do certain things, and so sometimes it's been a nice partnership where I am able to speak to certain things like that. And then I think about folks that have encouraged me in my involvement with professional organizations. So certainly Linda Tyler, who has been my boss my whole career, but also I think about Kelly Smith, who is a former past president of ASHP, and she really encouraged me to take a leadership role fairly early on in my career for a national organization, and it was such a great experience. And if she hadn't encouraged me, I would not have put my name forward at that point. So so many folks, but those are the few that came to mind.
Wonderful. So we do have a question that came in before around in pharmacy specifically, and potentially across various professions within healthcare, disciplines within healthcare. A majority of the workforce are women, yet leadership still remains very low in terms of the percentage that are women leaders. What obstacles do you think, not necessarily just talking about the obstacles, but how can we overcome that? How can we empower more female leaders to take on these roles? What environments should we create?
That's a really good question. I think, I loved your last question, because one of the environments that I think we need to create is one of support. It can be very discouraging to see women maybe not supporting one another. I think it's important to get women at the table on the search committees when leaders are being selected. I think it's important to just provide more visibility. And I think I can only speak from our organization, where I see a tremendous focus with COVID on some of our leaders who have been taken on a role that are women. And so I see this amazing group of women leading out in our organization. And I think that we are going to see some changes based on that. I hope it's the same at other organizations, but I would say the one thing that we can all do for each other is support, and make sure that if you're part of a search committee, that there are amazing women out there, make sure those women's names get added to the list. So yeah, that's, of course there are lots of obstacles, but I think support is most important.
100%. And I love that recommendation of making sure that when you're in even these rooms and you're helping decide, are you also helping recommend those that you know are very strong and capable for these positions that might, maybe there's certain personalities or maybe people that don't know that they actually do want to get out of their comfort zone, but need to be given that opportunity to be able to get out of their comfort zone within that.
Yeah.
Yeah. So we just got a recent question as well that just came in. I recently moved from Maryland to Florida about a year ago for family reasons. What would be your recommendation on how to become more involved in a healthcare leadership roles in a state where I really don't know anybody or nobody?
That's a good question, but what I would recommend is joining one of your state pharmacy societies. Usually it's a good way to meet other people, often from a wide variety of different health systems. Usually these are volunteer organizations, and so it's usually not too much of a lift to, if you show interest, to join one of the committees and start to network. I would definitely recommend that, and I encourage all of the learners, students, residents, wherever they end up. I say, be a part of your local pharmacy organization, because those are the people that are gonna be able to work with you, on the state level when you're interested in maybe making a change to your Pharmacy Practice Act. Here's the advocacy part of me again, getting out there, but it's a great way to make connections. And I would, it may seem like you may not have the time, but it's usually, these volunteer committees are maybe once a quarter, maybe once a month, but it's very, very valuable.
Yeah, and I agree. And I think too, to build on what we've been saying kind of across the session in terms of even defining the leadership role. So what does that ultimately mean for you? Because as you're actively pursuing that, right, what does that look like in terms of a leadership role? Is it to be very involved when you do get involved in your state organizations, be it pharmacy or any other healthcare organization? Does it mean being like having a specific role within that, or being just very involved to ultimately impact? So I think that builds on so much of what we've said so far in terms of leadership. And so that's a great question.
Yeah. Well, and I think also thinking about that, little L leader, if you're at your organization, there are usually lots of opportunities to, volunteer to be part of a task force or a committee. When you raise your hand and say yes to those things, it's, it just kind of can snowball and build.
Yeah, and it builds that trust over time that leads to bigger things as well. There's also a previous question on the, with everything going on right now with the pandemic and the stresses, and no matter where you are, it seems in the world, it is a hard time right now. And it seems like there's a lot we can do, but we always have to start, like you had mentioned before, with baby steps. So for those that are listening and kind of coming out of this, what are some maybe baby steps to kind of begin to you're very optimistic and we're also very optimistic, but how can we take the optimism and kind of even continue to have it outside of this session by taking these kind of baby steps? What do you think?
Baby steps for advocacy or baby steps for changing
anything. Just to start it moving towards positive change.
Yeah, I think so. Again, taking a small step to say yes to being on a committee or volunteering your time, or for a local organization, that can help. I think also even just staying up to date on the topics that you're passionate about. And so, that could mean, for me, it's a lot of drug shortages and drug pricing, but, other folks may be very passionate about hazardous drugs, or I would actually recommend subscribing to get an email listserv of the kind of whatever national requirements you might be interested in, whether that's CMS or FDA or in your country, whether it's nice that there are a number of any kinds of listservs, but just take 10 minutes a day to just focus in on what are the current events, regulations, issues impacting your passion area. And once you learn a little bit more about that, then those opportunities for advocacy may reveal themselves.
I love it. It also occurred to me as I was thinking through and also looking at some of these questions in terms of interdisciplinary communication. You speak extensively to people that aren't pharmacists, so that people that might not understand the issue at hand, or that are still within the healthcare space, but you're trying to deliver a message across disciplines. So now because also our attendees, not all of them are pharmacists, or even within healthcare, they're definitely not always speaking to those within their own discipline. What advice would you give as others are trying to communicate across disciplines, across sectors?
Such a great question. I think about methods of communication all the time. But I think one of the pitfalls that I see people make is not thinking about the message before saying it. So it's worth that pause to consider what is the message that you want to communicate, and have you made it concise? Have you made it short? People aren't going to read long emails. People aren't going to listen to a very lengthy explanation. Think about distilling your message down to a few key points. People can always follow up and ask you some additional details, but there's a variety of different ways to do this, but I love thinking about it in that SBAR format. Or just it can really help you distill down your ideas. So whenever someone might have me proof an email that they want to send out, 9 times out of 10 I recommend deleting half of it and just trying to
Do you see their like heart fall? You're like
it's hard to
your
receive
heart
that
drop.
feedback. I do it to myself though, I will type it all out and then
You're
delete
like,
half of it. Yeah. You can always cut. It's a lot easier that way. But if you have a clear and concise message, it will be understood by more people and be able to, especially if you're asking other people to carry forth that message to even more people. Having things as tight and concise as possible is my recommendation.
And I mean, I think even thinking through just in terms of sometimes even getting only minutes when you speak to someone, let alone,
Yes.
It being media or a decision maker of any sort. So I think there's so much power in also focusing on, because I think that's something maybe across the board. I know I constantly think about how am I communicating, so it doesn't, I think it's a growth, something that you have to focus on regardless of where you are in your career. Because even as you switch right now, if you're maybe familiar, for example, I'm more familiar with the drug shortages and then switch to another topic, you find yourself kind of relearning your communication strategy because it's a different area.
Yes, absolutely.
For sure. So let's just see if we have any more here. We have a few more minutes within that as we wait. Is there anything that actually, Dr. Fox, is there any closing remarks or final thoughts that you want to add before if we get any more questions on
I would just say thank you so much for having me. It is truly an honor to be invited. And I would just, closing thoughts, I would just say, take the time to think about your passion area and if there's some advocacy that you could do there to help improve patient care. And then be flexible. That's 2020, right? But it will help you regardless of wherever you end up. So thank you for having me.
What I've absolutely admired and loved too is the positivity that through this, we've talked about big topics actually that can be quite frustrating, like drug shortages and kind of all the disruptions that we're seeing as a result of the pandemic. But as I'm speaking to you, I'm even more positive that through specific action, no matter how big or small, we can truly make a positive impact in the various different areas that we're focused on, be it drug shortages, be it in pharmacy, be it in healthcare, and even beyond across our communities. So I think that's definitely a theme that I'm taking home in terms of
Sure.
taking those small steps, saying those yeses to make that positive impact for sure. So on behalf of Salus Vitae Group and myself, I would really love to thank you, Dr. Fox, for joining us today and for sharing your experiences and outlooks. I know I'm going to re-listen to this to take my own notes for sure, and it's always wonderful to speak with you. There are several actionable items and recommendations that I hope that you've all benefited from now and into the future. I think there's so much that we have yet to do. So supporting one another, which is also a big theme of this session, is going to be very instrumental so that we help ensure that we positively impact our communities. Now we have several exceptional leaders coming up in the next few weeks. So if you actually visit our website, salusvitaegroup.com, you can see all the upcoming events. Next week, we actually have Dr. Charlene Hope. She's the Chief Pharmacy Quality and Medication Safety Officer at the University of Chicago Medicine. So we're very excited to have her. So be sure to register there. And again, if you need anything, have any other questions that you would like, please send them over and we will try to get those answered for you. And then let me just make sure. Perfect. Thank you so much. And everyone have a wonderful day.